Joining us now is Frank Zaccanelli.
Frank Zaccanelli.
Let's welcome Frank Zaccanelli.
Live from the Real News Studios in Dallas, Texas, welcome to the To Be Frank Show. Your host, Frank Zaccanelli, has been in the world of domestic and international business and professional sports for 40 years. And as a former minority owner, president, and general manager of the Dallas Mavericks, he's been asked to comment on current events in the national news for most of his professional career. But what he and many others are really looking for is a place to find just the facts. Welcome to the To Be Frank Show.
Hello, I'm your host, Frank Zaccanelli of the To Be Frank Show, episode number 24. Now, why is 24 an important number? Well, this will be the last show of this season of the To Be Frank Show. When I started this, I thought I would do 10 to 12 shows, and it really kind of picked up. The popularity was good. Like I said, you know, most of the shows now are well over 100,000 views. And what happens in the podcasting business, you get those views over a period of time. But when I really set out to do this, I thought I would really do a test and do 10 shows, 12 shows. And so what I did is after the 10th or 12th show, all the people that were involved with me talked me into doing another 10 or 12 shows. So here we sit at the 24th show. Yes, this will be the last show of the season. What am I going to do with the show? I'm in discussions now with multiple people to figure out, you know, what we do and how we do. But it's really been a lot of fun being the host of the show. I hope that if you viewed the show, or even if today's your first show, you know, I hope that you like the content and you like the concept of the show. You have to remember, we started this with the concept that on television and on cable television, most of the information that's provided is ideologically based. And like many of my contemporaries, we sat around for years and years complaining about it. So when I finally decided, you know what, I could probably do a show that ultimately would be a news show, because I didn't want to do it just a sports show. And I didn't want to do kind of a lifestyle show. You know, I wanted to do a news show, and I wanted to see would the concept stick as it relates to, you know, really just providing a non-political view of the world. And the answer is, it does stick. And I think the world needs something like this. I just can't go on like a television show just every week, twice a week, because that's not really how my situation is set up. To do the 24 shows took a lot of my time, which I was happy to give, and a lot of research, which I was happy to do. And, you know, it's a lot of work to do these shows. And so if my name's going to be associated with it, I want to make sure they're right. Has everything been 100% right in the show? I mean, I can't say that. But 95% of the information that I've provided, I think, is non-biased, because I look at both sides of the equation. And I think it's informational, and that's at least what the feedback has been. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the whole show and everything else at the end of the show. I'm going to cover a few news topics so that we could kind of have a mix here. And then I'll talk a little bit about, again, why I think it's important that people do shows like this, and why, you know, the information that you're getting on television and you're getting on the cable networks is really equivalent to the new term gaslighting, or maybe it's an old term, but I certainly hadn't heard of it until one of my kids said, "Hey, Dad, just call it gaslighting. Everybody will know what you're talking about." I said, okay. But I think that if gaslighting is a term, that's what's going on in the main news media. And the hate that's abound, our country has got to get away from this. So I'll talk a little bit about that at the end of the show. But this will be the last show of the season. When the next season picks up will depend upon how some of these discussions are going and my schedule and some of these other things. But it's been a real pleasure and a privilege to really do the show, and it's been a lot of fun. And I hope that everyone who's watched it has enjoyed it. Okay, so the first segment really, and we're not going to have any video today. I said, I'm not going to show any video. We're going to talk, a little bit about all this stuff. But there was a shooting of two sheriffs in Compton, LA. Compton, for those of you that are not familiar with Los Angeles, is kind of the, I would say it's the minority area, mostly African-American area of Los Angeles. And in the day, Compton was not a very safe place. I think recently Compton has become, like Harlem, a much safer place, and recently over the last 5 to 10 years. But there's been issues, in Compton as it relates to some of the things that we've talked about on this show. I mean, it's really been left behind. It's mostly minority in the neighborhoods, a lot of African-American minority in the neighborhoods. Well, these two sheriffs are literally sitting in their car, and a guy, African-American, 28 to 30-year-old that's still on the loose that they're trying to track down, gets his gun and shoots both of them while they're sitting in their car and runs off. And this is really, I think, indicative of where we stand in this country as it relates to police. And part of my problem, and I've said this over and over, and the media has created an enormous amount of this. Now, why do I say that? I'm not saying the media is responsible for a young African-American male to pull the trigger on two sheriffs that are sitting in their car. What I'm saying is that this thing has been hyped and rehyped and politicized to a point that people have gone into a frenzy. When you take the COVID-19 situation in our country and a lot of the isolation, and then you add all of this situation about what's happening in our country with Black Lives Matter, the initial protests, and then, of course, the ensuing riots, and now the shootings, and now all the other lawlessness, you get yourself into a position to where, this is constantly being replayed, and it's being replayed in a lot of the media as, it's not so bad to be out there and to be rioting. Now, again, I'm not going to name any names, but there are excuse after excuse after excuse coming out of the media about why they cover this subject the way that they cover it. I mean, there's no other way to cover it other than this is lawlessness and it's something that shouldn't happen. But because we are in the middle of the worst political situation in United States history, and we're in the middle of the most important, most contested, most hateful election in United States history, that everyone has run for cover and taken sides. And there's really no one in the middle that is trying to talk some sense into both sides about how we need to run our country and how we need to get along. It's terrible. And that's one of the purposes that I set out with this show. Now, again, you're not going to make everybody happy with any show that you put on. You're going to be in a situation, quite frankly, that you get yourself into, that you've got some people that really want to be fed their own ideology. That's why these television networks and these cable companies have ratings to the level that they do. They want to be fed more about how they feel instead of looking at trying to get in the middle and be on the other side. Well, we get back now to the situation in Los Angeles with the sheriffs. I mean, this is a really terrible situation. I mean, these sheriffs were just shot point blank range for no reason other than the fact they had the uniform on sitting in a sheriff's car. Now, if this is where we've come with this, if this is where we are, this is the point that I've been trying to make for 24 shows, is this is not how we're going to be able to move our country forward. I know that everyone is upset about the police situation in this country, but we have to really take a look. There's as many police officers being shot now as there are minorities, African Americans, Hispanic Americans, white Americans. I mean, police officers are now just out there as almost a piñata to where they're just waiting to get hit. And that's not right, because that's where you're going to get into a situation where you're going to have incredible lawlessness. Because without the police, I've said it on the show, I'll say it again on this show, the police protect the minority communities more than they protect the suburbs. And I think people need to understand that in the minority communities. And the people in the minority communities that I talk to, they get it. They completely get it. But what you've got is you got a bunch of anarchists and you got a bunch of people that hate the United States. They hate the way that we live here. They hate the freedoms that we enjoy. And they spew a lot of stuff that ultimately gets somebody that may not be completely mentally there into a situation that what happens in Los Angeles. Now, again, we don't have the facts yet, but I think when we start to really take a look at the facts, I think what you're going to find is this was just a rogue individual that got upset with his life, got upset with the news, and decided to shoot police officers. That's where our country is, and it's not where we should be. Okay, so both sheriffs are in critical condition, and they both have had surgeries. And that's really not a good situation because, again, they're both fighting for their lives. Now, what does this do? What's the knee bone, shin bone to all of this? Well, here's what it is. The knee bone, shin bone is police officers all around the country now are paying attention to these events. You wonder a little bit why some of these police officers now, not to justify what happened with George Floyd, because that's unjustifiable, and not to justify anything that occurred in Kenosha, Wisconsin, which we're not hearing much about now. So that's another interesting thing that I think over the next month or two people need to follow. But what we are now seeing are police officers that are going to get a little trigger happy because they feel like they're the bait now. They feel like they're out there and they're the mark. I mean, this is just not a good situation. And again, this is being promoted in some ways by weak mayors. You know, we'll start out with the weakest mayor in the history of the United States of America, Billy D. de Blasio, followed by a close second, Teddy Wheeler, Summer of Love mayor in Seattle, and now Lovely Warren in Rochester, New York. What Lovely Warren has done, I covered on the last show, is just absolutely ridiculous. I've triple checked the information that I gave you on the African American police chief in Rochester. This guy had the best service record you could possibly have. But what she did is she just jumped on the bandwagon. No different than de Blasio. What the hell? Who cares what his name is? You know, Teddy Wheeler. It's the same thing. Okay? This is the problem. And we get into now, and I've covered this over and over. You know, if we're in a peaceful period of our country and we're sitting there and things are going along just fine, we don't really have a problem with the president. We don't really have a problem with the United States. The economy's good. Anybody could be mayor. Anybody could be governor. You know what it's exactly like? Is that when you walk on a plane and you're walking on the plane and you look to your left, I always look in there and I'm saying, all right, who's flying this plane? Because my life and my family's life is in their hands. But the only real time that any of us are ever going to need those two wonderful people that are in that cockpit is if there's a problem. And that happens less than 0.5% of the time. That's when you need the people who are in the cockpit. It's almost the same thing with these governors and these rubber chicken dinner mayors. You know, they can go give speeches and do all the stuff that they do. The problem is when a crisis hits, that's when you find out what is the mettle of a human being. I can tell you in my life, in my business life, in my personal life, you never find out about a human being until there's a problem. When things are just great and it's the honeymoon period and everybody's slapping each other on the back, you want to know something? Everybody's going to do what they say, okay? It's when you get into a situation when things don't go exactly the way they're supposed to. Then you find out the character and integrity of people. And I think the flaws have shown up in our country both at the state level and at the local level as it relates to these people that are elected officials that truly, during a crisis, have no experience and have no business to be able to handle the problems that people are having as elected officials. It just is what it is. So that's the issue that we are dealing with in our regional and local scenarios. Again, the shooting of the sheriffs is a byproduct of an awful lot of things. A lot of rhetoric, a lot of politics, a lot of news media, a lot of everything. The news media, just to take that, like a criminal court judge, I think the news media, when they get out of journalist school or whatever the hell they do, you don't have to go to journalist school to be a good journalist, just so we're clear. Many of them do, and that's good training, and God bless them. But here's the bottom line. They should take an oath to uphold their own integrity and character and to give people a fair chance of getting the facts. Now, I'm not talking about the opinion shows. I'm not talking about, the Sean Hannitys of the world and the Tucker Carlsons of the world. Just take those two, or Joy Reid, okay? These are opinion journalists, okay? It's kind of what they get paid to do, and so you do it. And if it's so, treats you the way you want to be treated and it tells you what you want to be told, then you watch those shows. It makes you feel better, probably sleep better at night. But for guys like me, a lot of people like me in the middle, we can't watch that anymore because it's not what we want. We want news, okay? But the opinion shows are the opinion shows. The problem is that crossing over into the news shows on each specific network, each specific national network and cable network, our ideologies, 85% of them are to the left, okay? They're to the left. It's the way it is in this country. And the fact of the matter is, that's their spin, whether they're giving you the news or not. I told you, and now I'll use names. You could go on Fox and watch a current event, and you could watch it, and then you could walk away after that 10-minute segment with an understanding of what you think just happened. You could then flip the channel, but you don't flip the channel anymore. I used to have to get up and flip the channel. Now it's all, like this. But you go to CNN, the same story, the exact same story, you think you're looking at a different story. Now, how could that be? How is that possible? That's exactly where we've gone in this country, and there's no stopping it. It's only going to get worse and worse and worse. I've had some people tell me, well, let's wait till after the election. After the election, all right, I'll give it to you right now. Number one, if Donald Trump wins, he's under 4 more years of assault by 85% of the media and every Democrat sworn to take him down. If Joe Biden wins, the Republicans are going to retaliate against Joe Biden for what they did to Trump. Okay? Now, it's not like, again, that Donald didn't deserve a lot of the criticism. We have criticized him as much as anybody on this show. But he still is the president of the United States, and he's still done some good things. And he's been investigated unlawfully, it appears to me, before he even took the oath of office in January of 2017. I mean, just look at the facts. The FBI, all the things that went on. And the Durham report, everybody's waiting now for the Durham report. If you don't know what the Durham report is, special prosecutor that's come in now to take a look at the phony Clinton dossier and all the events that led up to the FISA court and the applications to the FISA court using the dossier and a million other things, that happened. And we're trying to get the facts because I believe that that's something that ultimately needs to be handled. Now, what we forget, because 2020 has been so insane, okay? It has been the most insane year of my lifetime, okay? And I'm not 20 anymore. But over here, we forget that the end of 2019 and the beginning of 2020, the Democrats impeached the president. It's been so long ago, it seems like it's 15 years ago. It's only been like 9 months, 10 months, okay? But there's so much that has occurred, we don't even talk about that anymore. We've had an impeachment in the last 12 months, which obviously didn't go anywhere in the Senate, but the fact of the matter is they impeached the president. Look at what we've been living in the middle of. Instead of going up to Washington, taking their oath of Congress, the Senate, the administration, whatever oath you take, okay, and saying that we're going to do what's best for the American people, both sides now are only representing their base. So you know what happens to people right here, like me, the 20% in the middle, that I've said is going to decide this election in 10 states. And I mentioned those 10 states, okay? 10 states are going to decide this election with 20% of the vote in the middle, the independent vote, because everybody's already chose their sides. I've told both sides, if you're going to continue to play to your base, you're wasting your time. Here's where the election's going to be won and lost, and it's going to be won and lost within 10 states in the United States, okay? So here's the deal. The deal is you take your oaths and you go up there to serve. Nobody's serving anybody except for their particular ideology in their party. Nobody's worried about the American people. Now, this is a problem that I have with Donald Trump. I don't feel he's been president to all the people. And I think that's a big mistake. But Nancy Pelosi certainly has not been Speaker of the House to all the people. So there's an incredible amount of blame to go on both sides. So, you know, what I hope is when we're in this hiatus, if you will, where we're not doing the show, I'm hoping that all the viewers of the show can find some outlets to get your own information. And again, what I've said, I'm the sworn enemy. I hate to use that because now I'm stealing from a guy I don't watch. But I'm the sworn enemy to political rhetoric and ideology. But the problem is when you're covering the news, you're covering all these political things. What we tried to do here is not cover them in a political way. And I think for the most part, we've done a pretty good job. We've done a pretty good job. Okay. We're now stuck again in the middle of reports that this coronavirus is going to spike again. It just is what it is. I mean, like our country needed another obstacle, and I say our country, the world is caught up in this. But specifically to Americans, specifically to our country, you know, there's talk now that the cases are rising around the world, and I think we can expect the same thing here. You know, here we go. The Donald feels like he's got to say that we've turned the corner, and Anthony Fauci, who again, you like or you don't like. I don't like or dislike Anthony Fauci, okay? I don't. He's another guy that's got more experience than me, so I try to listen to him, and I try to figure out, is this political or is this real? But Fauci, quote, the U.S. is nowhere near rounding the corner, as Trump has said, on the coronavirus. Let me repeat. The U.S. is nowhere near rounding the corner. Now, here's the issue, and I get it. It's politics. Less than 2 months from an election, so I get it. But Donald Trump knows that the coronavirus is hung around his neck. All you got to do is look at the polls. It is the reason that he's somewhat behind. Now, the polls are tightening, as we call for on this show, and in the next 30 days after the first debate, my prediction right now is we're going to be in a dead heat. Now, what happens from there, I can't tell you. But, you know, Joe Biden can't sit in his basement. I mean, here's a guy that's giving speeches with his mask on, okay? Now, we've all been told social distancing is actually even more important than a mask. He's 10 to 15 feet away from everybody, and he's got a mask on. Now, this has got to be politics. It's got to be just, you know, Trump won't wear a mask and I'll wear a mask. So if you think wearing a mask is a good idea, vote for me. It's the only thing it can be. All right? And then the whole Kamala Harris thing, okay? I thought that we'd see her every day on TV. She loves the TV, almost the camera, almost as much as Trump. I mean, bottom line, okay? And we don't see her. So I don't know what's going on. But clearly, this situation, now the WHO, the World Health Organization, is not an honest organization. It's controlled somewhat by China, even though we gave them the most money. Now, the Donald backing out of it or giving them less money was a great idea. But they have said that it's reported, I think yesterday, It was the highest single-day increase in global infections since the pandemic began. Now, that's not a good statistic. That just really isn't. I know from my friends in Italy and France, they've opened up. They've got now issues again. And this coronavirus, as we stated on this show, if you look at pandemics for a pandemic's sake, they're 18 to 24 months. That's what they are. Now, the most important element of how we keep ourselves secure is a vaccine. Now, the Donald, for political reasons, vaccine's right around the corner. There are some that are saying, well, we hope by the end of the year. I mean, who knows? I know one thing about vaccines. If it comes out like the testing came out, not everybody's going to be able to get a vaccine. You're not going to know where to go. They're not going to be ready available. If you got to come up with, and I'm just using a hypothetical, 350 million doses, they better figure that one out logistically, because the tests still aren't right. Now, you can get a test now readily available. The problem is it takes 8 to 12 days to get the results. That's if you go through where you're not paying for the test or you're paying $5. Okay, I can go up here for $200 to get the results in 2 hours. Okay, I've said that on the show. That's not fair. Now, I can afford to pay $200. There's a lot of people that can't. When it comes to now the vaccine, though, you've got to assume that the vaccine is going to be in the same situation as the testing. There's no other way that you can look at it. It's going to have to be that. It's just what it is. Okay, so the information coming out of the World Health Organization, which I'm not a big fan of, is not the most positive information. When you hear Tony Fauci, and he pretty much contradicts the Donald, okay? Now, the Donald's on tape with Bob Woodward. Bob Woodward, for those of you that don't know who the hell he is, and he drives me a little bit nuts. He's one of the two reporters from the Washington Post, along with Bernstein, that basically broke the scandal with Richard Nixon in the Watergate scandal. So he's been around a long time. He leans, way to the left. If that's your persuasion, you love the guy. If it's not, you don't like him. But he tapes the Donald for his book, Rage, which I read. And to be honest with you, was it a good book? Was it a bad book? It was just another book, all right? But I read it. It talked a lot about the Donald and what people are saying and everything else about his style and what he does in the White House and his attention to detail. It's all the stuff. But he's got a tape from February that he now is confusing. This is what was reported today. He's now confusing that he thought the Donald, when he was talking about trying to downplay it, was talking about China instead of the United States. Go look it up. It's all over the news today, okay? Now, certain places will not give you that news because they don't want to, they don't want to in any way upset Bob Woodward. Over here, everybody's reporting it. So go check it out. But none of that made sense to me. But if the Donald was trying to downplay it because he didn't want to create panic, he could have done that, but he could have done it in a different manner. Could have done it in a different manner. Now he says we're rounding the corner. Well, statistics say otherwise. Now, all of the people on the right that are watching the show, they're sitting there right now, they're arguing with each other. Well, but the death rate is down, and it's not as lethal as everybody thought. All that's true. That is true. But here's the situation. We still don't know enough about the virus to understand the long-term effects to your organs, to a woman's reproductive system, to children. Now we get to children. So let's cover this. You got the situation now in the schools, okay? So let's talk about the schools, all right? There have been mixed reports in the schools about kind of how it's going. Some have suggested, well, you know what? It's working out okay. We're not seeing spread of the virus. We're not getting children sick. Teachers are doing okay. That's certain school districts in certain states. There are other situations where it's not working out as well. So this is becoming not only a regional scenario, but it's becoming a local scenario. And the issue really is this. This is what it's going to be because we don't really completely understand how to control this virus. If you're putting a bunch of kids back into school, we've got to wait now 10 to 20 days. We got to see now, okay? What are the statistics? Are kids coming down with this? I know one thing. When my kids were younger, if somebody got the flu or a cold in school, everybody got it. So we're going to have to see. But the reports are very mixed about the children and the situation with the schools. I've said it over and over on this show. What I didn't like is a lot of the Republicans from Trump down, all the way to this governor in Florida, Ron DeSantis, who's now one of my favorites. You're going to open the schools or we're going to hold up your funding. You don't threaten the schools. If I was running one of those schools, I'd say, great, come on, let's try it. Because I got all the parents behind me. I got all of your voters behind me, okay? So I'd have been like, okay, let's go. But the fact of the matter is that in the next 10 days now, we're going to see real numbers coming out of these schools. And right now, as I see it, it's a mixed bag. You may be sitting in one part of the country where you say, you know what, it's pretty good. But if you look at it in all parts of the country, it's kind of a mixed scenario. So we're going to keep our eye on that. The vaccine, as I mentioned, is a real deal we got to really concentrate on. Now, here's the most important thing that I thought I could report on today's show. There are 35 different companies that are presently right now in human trials for their version of the vaccine. I think that's hugely positive. Now, the question is, in a normal situation, these trials take years, but because of the situation with COVID, we've had to move up the time frames, and I'm all for that. You got a lot of scientists out there, we shouldn't do that. What the hell do you expect us to do? Okay? We got to get rid of this thing. We got to control this thing, not only for the health of our people, but for our economy, okay? COVID-19 has been used politically by governors and mayors in their states and in their cities as a protest against Trump, and that's not right. It's not right. Go over it over and over and over. Billy D. de Blasio ruined the number one city in the United States and one of the greatest cities in the world. He's ruined it. I'm telling you, what you see on the television, especially if you're watching CNN or MSNBC, you're not going to get the story. Read about it. People are moving out in droves. Companies are moving out in droves. It's unbelievable what this man has done. And then he sits there, what a beautiful day in New York. What are you, nuts? Okay. So the vaccine is something that I think everybody is going to have to pay very close attention to. And we're going to have to really make sure that we really understand all the pieces. Okay? All right. I talked about journalists and I talked about things in, the states and in the cities and all of that. This is all I have to say. If you're going to govern from here, you're never going to get much done. If you govern from here, you have an opportunity. I mean, you can't run your businesses from here. You can't run your lives from here. Why do we think that we can run the country? Why do we think we can run the states? Why do we think we can run the cities from here? You can't do it. When you're polarizing everything that's involved here, you just can't get to the point that ultimately you get anything done. And again, everybody's talking about, well, this is all going to change. This is all going to wait till the election. Yeah, wait till the election. I'm telling you, there's a potential that it's worse. And that's the whole problem, because we're not even handling the way that we're going into the election properly. Okay? The Democrats want to give $3 trillion away, and the Republicans want to give $300 million away. What I would suggest to you is that's the canyon-wide gap that exists in our politics in this country. That's as simple an analogy as I can give anybody. $3 trillion to $300 million. That's 10% over here of $3 trillion. It's pretty bad, okay? That's a canyon-wide gap that exists. And until that gap is filled, and I don't see it, our country is not going to be able to function. So incumbent upon all of this is everybody who's out there has got an obligation, I believe, not as a Republican, not as a Democrat, and not as an independent, but as an American, to do everything that they can to try to figure out how to bring this country together. That was another, reason kind of in closing now of this, not only show, but our first season. That was the main reason why I decided that I felt like I needed to, do this. Because every place that I went, it was either somebody on the far left or it was somebody on the far right. Now, I do have a lot of cohorts and a lot of contemporaries that are with me right here in the middle. But it's just astonishing when you really take a look at how many people are so polarized because, number one, they have been gaslighted. Number two, they've been told misinformation beyond comprehension. And number three, they really hate the other side. We've got to get rid of the hate in this country. If we don't get rid of the hate in this country, I'm not just talking African Americans to whites, whites to African Americans, minorities to whites. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the overall hate that exists inside the United States of America. It's at an all-time high for me. I can be honest. Think back into your own past and think back as you're watching this show into your parents and your grandparents. They wouldn't even understand the times that we're living in today. I know mine wouldn't. I know they wouldn't. When people were elected officials, they were revered as having a position of authority, a position of leadership, okay? There's no more of that now. It's all politics. It's all hate. It's all derived from ideology. And that's where we've got to get away from it. We've got to be able to just not do this anymore. So that's where I hope that our country can get. I'm in discussions now to decide what I'm going to do with season 2 of this show. I'm going to keep up on the To Be Frank show on the website, updates about what we're doing and how we're doing. We need to take some time. I've got to get to a few other things in my life, and then we're going to get back to trying to put together season 2 as it relates to this. If you've been an avid follower of the show, thank you so much for your support. We didn't bring on a sponsor. I didn't need one. I didn't want to cloud it with, bringing a sponsor on and having to sell you all their stuff, okay? Now, version 2 of the show may have sponsors. We may decide to do some audio stuff as well on the radio as well as the podcasting. So we're going to see about how this comes out. But what I want you to know in closing is this, is that I've had a good time doing it. I hope it's been informational for you, the viewer, and I hope that you pay attention to see what our next steps are. I'm going to be making sure that all that gets put on the website so you'll know what we're thinking about and when we're thinking about doing it. But I appreciate everybody who's watched the show. It's been fun for me. I'm your host, Frank Zaccanelli. Now, all 24 shows are still out there. So if you want to go back and look at those shows, the To Be Frank Show YouTube, the To Be Frank Show Twitter, the To Be Frank Show LinkedIn, the To Be Frank Show Facebook, and the ToBeFrankShow.com. So if you want to look at these shows again, if you thought they were interesting, send them to your friends. It'll be fun because I know that I'll go back and look at some of them and think about what the hell was I doing, what was I thinking. But at least they're all archived, and that's the beauty of the podcasting side is you can pull them up anytime you want them. So I'm your host, Frank Zaccanelli, signing off not only for show 24, but signing off for this season. We'll be back to you, in touch with you through the To Be Frank Show website. And everybody have a safe and healthy rest of this year, if that's how long it takes me. But stay safe, keep your kids safe, keep your family safe, and try to come in the middle. All right, I'll see everybody the next season. Thanks so much for watching. Signing off.